So then let's talk maybe a little bit how we got here. And what do I mean with how we got here? How did we get to a situation where a lot of people are interested in AI and a lot of people want to use AI in their thing? As I said, AI is a concept that has been around since the 1950s, or at least the term was around since the 1950s. But over the last years and over the last decade, the evolution of AI was kind of skyrocketing when you look into the number of published papers and into the number of real-world applications. And the thing that probably made you click on this webinar for today is something that we have seen the first time in late 2022, where we saw this application called ChatGPT, being a very easy chat interface where you could do in your hands without any technical knowledge something with AI. ChatGPT is nothing else than an interface between a large language model. In late 2022, this model was called GPT 3.5, with GPT standing for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So these are called transformer models because they were trained on a certain set to understand certain topics, or I wouldn't say understands, but I would rather say have some statistics about certain topics and then predict which the answer, the most likely answer to your question or to your consumption is that you would like to receive. That ChatGPT thing got completely through the roof and got viral, and it feels like now every other person, even if you go to a supermarket, knows about ChatGPT. Which is good on the one hand, but for business use, also somewhat of a little bit of a trap. Let me explain that. This chat interface here over a large language model is super easy to use. Anybody who has ever used WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or any type of chatting application can put something in, and this large language model will always output an answer of some sort to it. Not talking about the quality, but just talking, everybody could do something with it. Yet this application here is quite far from what we would say, or what we call productive use in an enterprise environment, or even in a smaller business environment. But yet it allowed a lot of businesses, a lot of people to, I call it, dream what the world could be like, and what applications and use cases might be on the horizon. And there was a lot of studies around the impact of this type of technology. I have here an analysis from Goldman Sachs, where they have surveyed different industries that's here on the x-axis, and on the y-axis with and color coded how much % of their overall processes and working activities will see no automation with AI, will potentially see AI being used as a complement, for example, in some sort of a co-pilot thing, or in terms of a pre-process something for me, and then I have to sign it off type of application. And how much where can we actually replace current existing business processes with AI that usually someone manually would do. And you see that there is, let's say, very physical industries like the building and the construction area, where there is not a lot of potential for especially generative AI. Maybe with robotics at some point in time, but not a lot with generative AI. On the other hand, you see a lot of industries where you're not going to replace people too much with AI, but where AI will be used as a complement to work that workers in this area will do. Perfect examples are computer programming or educational areas, or sales over here. And then you see a bunch of outliers for, you see a little bit that there's an opportunity for a lot of even a replacement and complete automation of certain tasks. Office administration and support and legal are the biggest over here, which interestingly, I think this graphic here aged quite well because our biggest application that we're working on today is a legal AI application that helps you on research on your cases, which I find rather interesting. We are going to talk about enterprise generative AI in a second, just for also the people who joined a little bit late. If you have any type of question, please feel free to write them in the chat. My colleague David is monitoring, and we will go over them step by step in the very end. But first, let's talk about generative AI in enterprise. So what are the differences and the challenges that we have to think about when we want to use generative AI or a ChatGPT in enterprise? I should just say most people actually what you want is not a ChatGPT in enterprise, but what ChatGPT does, but in enterprise, and that's a big difference. And the first, let's say, I grouped that in three different topics: scaling and reproducibility, compliance and privacy, and data and systems integration. So getting started with ChatGPT is easy, but creating real value takes education. There's that topic of prompt engineering. So learning how to write prompts to a large language model that give you exactly what you want is by no means intuitive or obvious. So we also have a prompt engineering webinars every month, where we're going in 3 hours deep into how to write good prompts. But in the end, the problem that you still have is when you assign 100 people to write a prompt that has a certain goal. For example, write a prompt that answers a customer invoice. You will always get a different prompt because the people always write something a little bit different. They put different context information in. So your mileage may vary, and you don't really have a unified tone, style, output, quality metric when you let just people sit there manually, write something to ChatGPT and put it into an email to the system or anything. And that's, of course, for operations not ideal because it leaves a lot of blank space and wiggle room for you to fall into any type of a lot of possible operational trouble. The second part is compliance and privacy. So ingesting your private data into a third-party tool, which is OpenAI, which is basically an OpenAI tool, a software that runs on OpenAI servers somewhere in the United States, is often, especially here in Europe, where we are, a compliance issue, especially when you talk about personal identifiable information. Yet there are other ways how you could get around that. For example, you can today you can deploy your own private isolated large language model. For example, Llama 2 that comes from Meta, or OpenAI, a private copy in OpenAI in your personal Azure tenant if you are a Microsoft customer, where you have this kind of isolation that you have to. And then we have the last part, which is data and systems integration. The large language models that we have today were trained on, I say, the collective wisdom of the worlds on how to answer your questions. But if you ask ChatGPT, how much money did how much revenue did my organization make last year in EMEA in Q3? You might have an answer that says, I don't know because I don't have access to that. There are a lot of different ways how you can ingest your company knowledge and give your large language model access to your company knowledge. That takes a lot of more work than just writing something to ChatGPT. Also, topics like having these type of modules integrated in large-scale IT infrastructure that you already have in your organization with already existing authentication, and role models behind is sometimes non-trivial and something that has to be crafted very carefully. And with these challenges in mind, we will look now into how enterprise generative AI applications typically look like in terms of the architecture, in terms of how you build them and what the pieces and the components is that you have to manage. Some of you who already do that know, I think, quite a lot of it, but I drew here something of a little bit of a reference architecture. On the very bottom of your architecture, you have hardware. These large language models were trained on a large scale hardware with a lot of mostly GPUs these days, but there's also other chips that can produce that to train, but also to evaluate a prompt you need to execute that in a beefy piece of hardware. The next layer on top of that is models. So there's large language models. OpenAI's GPT-3, GPT-4 is a model, but there's also, you can train also your own models, or you can fine tune ones, or you can use an open source model. And then there's always this connection on the next upper level to connect to your own data and to actually orchestrate prompts and to orchestrate processes with different prompts that give you in the end what you want to have. And that orchestration layer can get quite complex. Before we even talk about the highest level, that's the application. That's your AI football coach app that you have on your phone, teaching you about what you have to do to prepare yourself mentally for your next big game. And we are going to talk about these elements here a little bit in depth. I think I already touched on hardware. So the thing that you don't see when you are using ChatGPT just as a consumer is that the large language models behind ChatGPT they were trained on quite a lot of data, and we're talking here about hundreds of billions of words from knowledge that is somewhere accessible in the internet, in books, in Wikipedia, and in other things. And that's quite an expensive approach. So it's quite an expensive task to train these models. But also when an LLM is trained and you only use it to generate an answer to your prompt, to generate an output, also that is by an order of magnitude more expensive than just making a database query and putting it to the user. So we have to think about these things as like every completion is some sort of a commodity. We'll talk about that later a little bit more in detail. And these type of tasks require hardware and usually very beefy hardware, like large scale clusters of graphics cards, of GPUs, or lately I heard about a startup called Grok that made very specific chips that are completely optimized on large language models, interestingly. This hardware is usually in data centers, either of the model providers or if of another cloud provider where you host a pre-existing model. This hardware gets to work every time you need to evaluate a prompt. When we think about going to the next layer in the system, and in a reference application for different systems, we see that we have options to have different large language models. And we can, for example, use an AI model as a service model. We can use an on-premise pre-trained model, or we can train our own large language model from scratch. AI model as a service, you probably already know an instance of that because that's exactly how OpenAI's GPT 3.5 and 4 work. You make a call, that call goes to OpenAI, and you get the answer back. It's a black box for you. You only see what goes in and what goes out, but you have no idea what happens in between. There's a provider, and you pay for these services. On the other hand, in terms of privacy, that also means that you are basically talking to another third party. with potentially sensitive data. It depends what industry you are in. If you're doing analysis of recipes for cooking, I think this is not so much of a problem. But if you are talking about medical health records, especially if you're in Europe, there might be a lot of compliance issues that arise with that. But all depending on the case. If you use an on-premise pre-trained model, you can deploy basically a publicly available open source model like Llama 2 from Meta in your own infrastructure of your choosing and orchestrate it as part of your application as you write. You can also fine-tune it. That's the next layer that we are going to talk about later. Or if you are very, let's say, very ambitious, you can also train your own models from scratch. But given the people that we have here today, if I would say if you are not Google or you want to be a competitor on a commodity market, don't train your own large language model from scratch. That doesn't make, in the most cases, doesn't make economic sense at all. Then we have to talk about other opportunities to create, a certain flavor of an large language model that has your company data in it, and one of them is called fine tuning. So you can add company specific information or use case specific information in a way that you just train the model a little bit further. And that's what we call fine tuning. So if the GPT-4 was, I think, the last time trained until the data of October 2023, if you want to have new data in, you can basically fine tune that model to your liking. That's also quite expensive approach, but there is also a different approach how we can do that, which is called Retrieval Augmented Generation, which we are going to talk about in a couple of minutes. In the end, there's also tools to operate and monitor your models and how much you spend on these models. And here is really something where cost monitoring is much more necessary and more crucial because let's say these bills can get easily out of hand if you are not looking too closely into what you're spending for your large language models. Because in the end, AI completions are some sort of a commodity market, if you think about that. Let me expand on that for a second, that you know what I mean. In the end, when we think about commodity markets like oil, I can get a barrel of Brent oil, or I can get a barrel of fracking oil from the United States. If I'm a petroleum company, it doesn't really matter because the oil is more or less in the same quality. It's interchangeable. It doesn't really matter a lot if you have batch number 240 of Brent oil or if you have batch number 241 of a barrel of Brent oil. In the same way that if you make one call to OpenAI, another call to OpenAI is semantically very similar if you have the same properties. You have market dynamics like oil calls to especially these model as a service providers are influenced by supply and demand. And at the moment, we have a little bit of a problem in supply of graphic cards and their availability. So and a lot of bigger players are also subsidizing the access to stimulate usage, of course. You have homogeneity. So LLMs can be categorized in certain tiers based on their power and price. So the S tier so far is coming from OpenAI with GPT-4. There is now an open source model that's called Abacus that is supposed to be not too far away from that quality. But generally, you can add these models in terms of what they are capable of, in terms of what the tasks are that you can give them, a little bit in these tiers, but within these tiers quite homogenized. And in the end, they are large language model calls are primary products that you use usually to drive other applications that are not only that wrap this functionality, that do something on a business level behind it. So that's maybe a little bit of a stretch, but think of it a little bit as like a commodity market. On the other hand, we have to, whenever we have a new case, when we have a new completion, and where we need our company data, we also have to think about what this company data is and where we get it in. For that, we have to think about case-specific and case-independent data, and specifically context data. Case-specific input data is input that is either provided by an end user or by an application layer of a system. So if you say, write me, if you have, let's say, a recipe on how to write good recipes for food, so you have your own prompt templates that create some food recipes for you. The availability of what products you have to create a recipe would be one of the case-specific inputs. On the other hand, you have also data that is stored, for example, for your company, and that you could use as giving as in a certain prompt. Think about this case that I was talking about earlier. You have this company chatbot, and you want to ask this company chatbot, hey, how much revenue did we make in Q3 last year in EMEA by selling toys? This is then retrieving this context data from somewhere where this information is stored, is a case specific input data that you have. And with retrieval augmented generation, and that's what I'm going to show you next, we can get your company data into such a system. Why would we do that? Well, because the pre-trained models mostly don't know your company data, so filling gaps. It is for large language models also very challenging to handle large pieces of data very efficiently because it hallucinates. And that is also the problem with pre-trained models. And when you especially have use cases where the model has not seen this piece of information before that you are asking for at the moment, and it will just give you a complete wrong answer with absolute confidence. And that doesn't help you, especially as an enterprise, because you want to make sure that your data is not just combined and mix match from somewhere together, but that you can trace back this information was formulated in a text, and the source of this information is somewhere in my database or somewhere in my PDF document that had this information. And this is what we call retrieval augmented generation, if we are using an external database to do something like that. For that, and that's something that I want to not to go too deep into right now, but something that many people are not aware, because these large language models, they're not only good for chatting, but they are also good in representing text as numbers and understanding semantics of text. So what's the semantic of a text? I have here the text, I want to eat pizza. There is semantics. For example, I is the one who does something. The want is referring to I. The eat pizza is the what. The pizza is referring to eating, and the to is making the sentence behind it. So there is a piece of semantics in contrast to syntax behind this. And large language models can represent these texts in a way that we can search semantically for this text with another piece of text. Let me explain that a little bit more in detail. We have, I have let's say, a simple search engine. This search engine is looking for keywords. So if you are looking for, if you say, I want to get all pieces of text where someone eated pizza, where someone ate pizza, then you will get all sentences where somewhere the term pizza is in. But you will not get any sentence where the term calzone is in, because but on the other hand, on a semantic level, a calzone is also a type of pizza. It's just a pizza, flapped together. and baked. I hope we don't have any Italians in here that are going to murder me now, but let's let's keep it like that. In the end, when you think about that, or you think about doing invoicing and you want to categorize your invoices according to some categories, so there might be one category that is called smartphones, tablets, and wearables keyword. And if you have an invoice that says Samsung Galaxy A40, a keyword-based search would not be able to make this interpretation that a Galaxy A40 is a smartphone and will not give you any result. Semantic search, on the other hand, with embeddings, that's the principle of how we are getting semantics in here, can do that. And we can store these embeddings in a vector database and make it searchable. So that works in the following way. We basically have large amounts of data. It's can be terabytes actually. We create an embedding, which is a numerical vector representation of the semantics of this piece of text, and we store it in a database. And then when we have let's say when we have a prompter where we have a query where we say, give me all of the info, all of the orders where we had pizza in for the last quarter, we are doing a similarity search, and we will retrieve in this numbers the semantics and the sentences that are relevant to this query. We reconstruct the clear text, and so we will get in the end something that we can put into a large language model and produce. That helps. There's a lot more complexity behind the text chunks. There's input context related to that, but in the end, you can think of it like a company Google, a company search engine. Think you have all of your data in your organization somewhere in a vector database, and it can, and a smart search engine can understand the concepts behind what you are asking and find the right and relevant pieces of text to that. And then you can just tweak it with an LLM on what to do with it. And that's how retrieval augmented generation works. And if you ask me, retrieval augmented generation is for most of the use cases in enterprise the go-to way, because you have exactly that link between I created this sentence based on the information that I retrieved from this chunk of text that is somewhere in my database. You can cite sources. With large language models only, you can't cite sources. You never can. You can say, give me the sources, and it will give you something that is completely made up. But you cannot trace the sources because there's not a single source of the answer to a question, but more of a stochastic model behind that. Same with a fine tuning. So, and when we have now these things in place, we have a model that was trained and that we can execute. On the other hand, we have data. It comes to bringing these things together, and that's what we call orchestration. And we in the Center for Deep Tech Innovation, we have a spin-off that is called End-Engine. It's basically a process engine where we are connecting large language models, where we collect templates of prompts and existing enterprise systems with their information that we use for context for retrieval augmented generation. And we put it all together to create the answers to the things that you would like to have. And in the end, this is what I would say right now a high-level reference architecture of an enterprise application with large language models is. Not everything is a chatbot. If it doesn't make sense to make a chatbot, just don't make a chatbot just for the sake of it. Of course, your application here can always be a chatbot. That's no problem. But think really about what the use case is, and maybe it just makes sense to have a bunch of templates that make 3 calls to 3 different AI models that do text to speech, that do OCR, one that does audio transcription, where you can build your processes together. You always have a hardware layer, even if you don't see it, but it's there, and the execution of these models are expensive. You have models. These models always need to be trained. They need to be trained either by you, which I don't recommend, or be pre-trained by somebody else, either as a model as a service or as an open source model that you have pre-trained and that can execute yourself. You can fine-tune it. And then you can put it into an orchestration that goes then to your case-specific data, into your company-specific data, with retrieval augmented generation, with vector databases, with embeddings, and with semantic search.
Cool.
And in the end, please mute yourself. Thank you. And in the end, we have different applications that we can build with that and integrate into our large-scale IT infrastructure that we already have. So that is my very short introduction on enterprise AI and what it looks like. We are going to start a discussion in the question and answer session now in a couple of seconds. But before, just want to tell you that we do these webinars here for free, but of course we're also a business. If you need guidance to support you on your enterprise AI journey and you would like to have a sparring partner, we work with a lot of companies like yours and help getting your feet on the ground. We work with developer teams also to implement, and we do a lot of training and courses. One of the trainings that I introduced in the beginning already, we have our AI 432-100 training and jumpstart program, where we will in 4 weeks educate 3 of your people in your organization in 2 sessions per week, how to optimize your processes, how to build real applications and proof of concepts that you can use directly afterwards from 0 to 100. This program is covering a bunch of different types of generative AI. We use text generation, document processing with retrieval augmented generation, but also digitization in terms of text scanning, OCR, knowledge search. We also do image generation, audio, speech to text, text to speech, audio transcription, these type of things, all as building blocks that you have to just order in a certain process, and you can make yourself a little bit independent. If that's something for you where you would like to dive deeper, I have here a link for my Calendly, and feel free to book a meeting. And I will leave this slide just as it is here for now. And I will check now the chat if we have certain questions. David, did you see any questions?
At the moment, there's no particular questions, only general questions about the webinar.
Okay.
But now you have the chance to ask questions.
Now you have the chance, or raise your virtual hands and speak to me personally, however you wish. And we even have AI tools that take notes in this meeting today. Who would have thought? Ricardo, very smart. Very smart. That makes quite a lot of sense. Actually, a very interesting application, AI note takers.
Yeah, it does all my minute taking for me for all my meetings. So yeah, it's my little AI agent.
That's smart. Are you happy with the pre and post processing that it does?
Yeah, I think it does a general job of kind of analyzing the key points, the key talking points, and follow-up items. One thing I think it can improve, though, I think Zoom has an AI companion that does a better job of understanding the context of the meetings and so on. But yeah, it's a work in progress, and I'm excited about it.
Okay, cool. Do you have any questions for the topic of today, Ricardo, or are you all happy?
Well, yeah, I did ask a question, right? I know you mentioned training and jumpstart program for, you make yourself available to organizations and so on. I think there may be an opportunity here beyond this to actually do some sort of partnership where not necessarily for our company. I mean, we have an education technology company that is focused on using AI to teach students in a very personalized way. But I do believe that for companies who want to kind of go into this era of AI, there's an opportunity certainly to upskill their managers, their senior managers, their officers in this realm. And if we could do a partnership of some sort where you come in, you do that work, we do the groundwork locally, and then we kind of bring you in. That's something I'm asking if that's something you'd be open.
Absolutely. I would say let's book a meeting, let's set something up, and let's talk a little bit deeper. about
Okay.
that? Because that sounds pretty interesting. Of course, that's something that we're always open to. Super.
Okay.
I see Burke has a hand raised. Burke,
Hi there, it's Borge, but you wouldn't know.
Borge, sorry.
No worries. One question that I had, like, how would you build a system? Suppose you're using a LLM system for onboarding a staff member.
Yeah.
And so it becomes your mentor, your friend, and you're asking questions. And based on the information that it has, it actually gives you all the information or invalid information. Like for a developer, they say, use this command line, it doesn't work. And then going to the internet, other data, it can find the right information. Is there a way to feedback that into the system so that the next trained person would actually not run into the same problem of this outdated library or outdated tool?
Yes, I understand what you mean. So in the end, you have to ask if the knowledge that you are giving, so we have to distinguish between knowledge that you are giving that is company specific or that is independent. If you have something like, for example, coding guidelines, you probably have within your company, you have a certain standard of code. You always write clean code, you write inline comments from maximum 10 words to document. You use different things. That's something that is, of course, not knowledge from the internet, but it's more something that you have probably in some sort of knowledge database, in a wiki, in Confluence, or in a Word document, or in a Drive doc. I would put these type of information that you already have. I would put them put this information. I would put it in a system that does some retrieval augmented generation, so that you are sure that you are following the guidelines of your company first, and then only if you don't find something anything in there, you are going to search on a different either with a different model or in the internet. There is, for example, the Microsoft Copilot application that also has insights and connections to the internet and can query the internet with the Bing search engine rather efficiently or more or less efficiently. And what I would advise is that you always track all of the requests and responses that your application gives to the user. Because based on that, you can do a lot of analytics. You can see how much of which type of questions came there, and how good something like the answer was. And the second step that I always advise is add a little bit of functionality where you can just, even if it's simple, with a thumbs up, thumbs down, where you let the user say, how good was this answer for you? How helpful was it? And with that, you can identify the gaps, and you can make it over time better and better, either with manually searching and filling the knowledge gaps, or by other types of analysis. Does that help you?
Yeah, and maybe one more question around that. So
Yeah.
the orchestration layer, can it write back into the vector database because of some better information that it found?
Technically,
or is it a separate step?
Technically, yes. Technically, yes. Nothing is holding you back from doing that. In the end, I mean, this context retrieval, it's an API call. It's nothing else. So vector databases, you can also with API calls, of course, insert there something. So the orchestration layer, it's just a question of software architecture. If you see that here as that block, or if you see a different block next to it, but generally nothing is holding you back from that on a technical level.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
All right. We have questions. We have more questions. Now they're coming. You know, when the first jumps into the water, the others are coming. Let me, David, who are we taking first? Peter?
I think Charlie Oliver, but I'm not sure if she's still present. Otherwise, it would be Peter.
Okay, Peter. Then let's take Peter. So Peter, feel free to unmute yourself. I see you are working with AWS Bedrock and Anthropic to generate an energy AI agent, and you struggle with following the flow of the chat. Is it hard to design the orchestration in such a way that it is steering the conversation rather than just a question answer on a prompt? And is that on the application layer? So, Peter, tell me a little bit, what does that energy AI do? What is it? Is it answering about plans, or what does it do?
Yeah, it uses smart meter data, and the smart meter data is already, there's all kinds of AI models behind it to break down the smart meter data into what energy you used and what your solar production was, and these kinds of metrics will be interesting for customers to ask for. But suppose you want to create an energy agent that prompts that a little bit to the user, so that he's capable of seeing what he's able to ask to the agent, and the agent comes back with answers, but also wants to come with recommendations, let's say, without the user asking for it first, right? So it is more or less this how the conversation is structured. So the agent is very capable of finding an answer to a user question, but the user generally doesn't know what to ask to the agent. And that is the area where I'm struggling. So it's not so much in the agent itself, but in the chat that is offered, I think, by Anthropic and other LLMs. It's very much fire and get an answer and that's it, right? So my assumption is that what I'm just explaining that is more in the application layer to steer that a little bit, but I just was interested if you recognize the problem and what to do with it.
We recognize the problem because we have this experienced a lot of times. Let's say what the most common way to mitigate this problem is working with options after a certain answer. So you have probably seen the old-fashioned chatbots. They often gave you options. For example, you ask one question in text, and it says, "How was my energy consumption last week?" Let's say it like this.
Yeah.
And it tells you, "Oh, you used 15 kilowatt hours,
Yes.
and that was quite good according to our benchmark, but there are things to optimize." Then you give it an option as a pill where say, "Where's my optimization potential? How can I compare? How did I develop compared to last week or last year?" And you guide that with these type of
Okay, so those
predefined
options can be put in the answer already. So
I wouldn't put it in the answer. I would let the large language model generate you
generate options.
or that you predefine the options so that it gives it back. Can be done either way, but I would really recommend using options to guide the flow a little bit, to also train and teach the users a bit how to use this application.
Yeah, okay, that is a smart one. Okay, I have to look into that. Thanks for the answer. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. So then we have the next one is Maldonado. If we don't, also feel free to put your camera on and unmute yourself. If we don't have the financial resources to build our own servers for our nonprofit organization, but still want to use ChatGPT, how can we load all our organization's data into ChatGPT since it limits how much data we can upload at one time? With the one option would be the Retrieval Augmented Generation. Then you don't have to build your own servers for the large language model, but you have to host somewhere this database that has your Retrieval Augmented Generation context data in it. For example, there is an application called Pinecone. I will just type that here in the chat. Pinecone, where you can where you have a cloud application where you can store all of your data unlimited, and you just pay by the amount of kilobytes that you have there, but it's rather cheap to do that. Then you have basically an architecture where you have Pinecone as your data store, and you have ChatGPT, and you have the AI as a service ChatGPT GPT-4 model to do completions. And then you need the only thing that you need to build is the orchestration layer behind it that makes this call. If you even don't want to do that yourself, we actually have a no-code product that does that for you, where you can say, I have here my knowledge base, get my knowledge base, and I have here processes, and I would like to use OpenAI, or I would use to like to use any type of Mistral application or whatever model that you want to use. And you don't want to host it yourself, just also either book a meeting or give me or write me an email. Then we can hook you up for that application over there. Or you use something something that is using fine tuning in the end. That could also be the option. Good. Then we answered the questions that I see in the chat. David, is there anything, did I miss anything or anybody?
Yeah, just another one came in by Kjaran.
Hi there, Marcel. Great talk. I learned a lot. I'm an AI newbie, so but I've been looking at some stuff recently, and I saw the word orchestration on one of your slides, and I was wondering, are there tools to mean that you don't have to orchestrate from scratch? I read like a small amount of information about something called LangChain recently. Is LangChain something that fits into the orchestration part of the equation?
There is a tool that is using LangChain that's built on top of LangChain that's called Flowwise. That is an orchestration layer, but only for chatbots. That thing cannot do anything else but chatbots. And it lets you do your retrieval augmented generation. Because there's also all of these other applications that are not chatbots. This is actually the product that I've been talking about that we developed ourselves called Embeddings. That helps you to do this orchestration end to end. So I can also show you how that looks like. You have here basically these type of no-code interfaces where you have templates. And each of these things that you see here on the lower side are all different prompts. This here is for a legal use case that we had. And up there, you can select different models that are being used in these prompts, and you can feed your own data information and your own, let's say, vector storage as context information in here, and then process further. So if you want to have something that you can also embed in other applications, for example, an email comes in, and every time an email comes in, you have 500 emails per day. You just want to do an email triage and forward it to the right person, but therefore you have to read and understand the email. You can do that with AI, and you could build a workflow that does these things. So if you're using a chatbot, I would recommend Flowwise. Even though with Flowwise you have to be careful. It's good for prototyping. It's not good for productive use. If you have not a chatbot flow, but just other text processing flows, we can hook you up with a test version of Embeddings and show you a little bit what it is, because that's the gap that we have seen in the market. That's why we built this application actually ourselves.
Super. It looks great, by the way.
Thank you very much. That's lovely. Okay. I think I don't see any more hands. I don't see any. Oh, Ricardo wants to get a demo. Okay. I can. Yeah, we can give you access. Just shoot me an email and we will hook you up to it. We will give you an introduction, but I can also just demo something very quickly for you. I had here an application that I did together with a venture capital company. And this venture capital company has the problem, or let's say the luxury situation, that they're getting 2,500 pitch decks per year from startups that want investment for them. And of course, a venture capital company doesn't want to miss out on a good opportunity, but they also can't read in depth into all of these pitch decks, because then they're just overwhelmed. And what we did together with them is we modeled certain processes with them to make their life easier. And we can create here many new processes that we want. And I want to show you a process that I already did. So whenever we have a company, a startup applying, we have always the same structure. We always have founders with their names and their descriptions, somewhere most probably in the form, and you have a startup name. And we want to analyze how good these founders match together in the startup. And what we can do here is we can drag and drop certain AI components together to build an application. So for example, I say I would like to use a ChatGPT model, or I would like to use GPT-4, or I would like to use the new GPT-4 Turbo, or a Llama, that's an open source model, Llama 70 billion. And I would like to use this model on a prompt and execute that in my application. And that's basically what we call a task. So, and in here, you can connect this model to this prompt and say, this here is now my prompt, and I'm going to start here writing what this prompt is looking like, and I will parameterize this prompt. I have done that actually here. And I say the first step in my analysis to build or to analyze a company pitch deck is, I say in my prompt, I have the following team composition for the startup with startup name, asking me for funding. It's founder 1 with name and description, founder 2 with name and description, and founder 3. And I have here context information, which says how good or how the ideal seed startup team should look like. And there's information. We always need to have a CEO who should be a dreamer, a visionary, an engineer who can build something. And then we need somebody who can bring in some money, a hustler of some sort. In the end, I say in the prompt, give me a score from X out of 10. That's the first step in my process. And the second step, I do the same thing, but I look into the gender balance and I ask, how good is the gender balance in that team? And in my third step, I say, look on their past experiences and tell me how good they are, how well they are suited for the job in the company based on their past experience. And then you also get a score from 1 to 10. And the last, let's say the last task also uses, in this case, they use GPT 3.5 and combines all of the information from the previous steps into one. And this is a template that you can use many times. And that's because you have here different input templates where you can say, for example, in each new case, so in each new case that a startup is coming and is asking for money, we have variables that we need to fill in. And we can fill in text, we can fill in files, we can do some OCR, but we can also scrape some information from a website. In here, these are all text boxes. And we store this process here in this no-code interface, so that we can automatically generate a live application. So what you see here, there was no code behind it. You didn't have to do anything, but we used this template that we just built. And this template that we just built just asks us now to fill in information for our case. And in this case, we have a startup called Yebi, and we have Ariana Chen, who is an HR technology and analytics specialist and worked with Fortune 500 companies. And she's the CEO of the company called Yebi. She's a firm believer in cultivating a workplace where everyone has an opportunity to grow. We insert information about the CTO and the CMO and basically fill out these variables that I've just shown you. And what happens now in the end is the orchestration of that process according to that definition that we've done. So these 3 steps: first analyze how well, first analyze how they're in terms of gender balance, how well they're suited for their job in the company, based on what you have what they have worked before. And the first one is coming then and putting that all together. And in a couple of seconds, you will see the answer to that very specific prompt coming here. That platform, so this is of course not only a prototyping platform, but it is also something that you can directly plug and play into your existing systems via an API integration, and can basically build anything that you would like. We have also parts for OCR, so text-to-speech, speech-to-text, text scanning. We have translation modules, we have audio translation, and you can just let me show you that again. You can just freely go there together and combine different AI models and put them into different processes. For example, we have here speech synthesis. So if you want to have this report not as written, but as read out to you, you can use the Azure multi-language text-to-speech or something else.
Thank you.
Good.
This is impressive.
Was very happy to show. If you have any other questions, I'm more than happy to get you hooked up to the system. We are actually now in a beta phase, and we're looking to beta users, and it's going to be mid of March completely in a productive use. Giovanni, you want to ask how repeatable are the outputs from a large language model? Or I actually see Victor asking before, can a task be a custom GPT prompt? Yes, these things that you see here are all custom GPT prompts. They can. And Giovanni, you want to know how repeatable are the outputs from the large language model? That depends on your prompt. If you prompt in the right way and if you put the right information in there, they are quite repeatable, and you can also influence how repeatable they are with what we call hyperparameters and hyperparameter optimization. So there is parameters called temperature, frequency penalty, presence penalty, max and the max number of tokens. With a temperature, you can basically, I would say colloquially, adjust how creative an answer gets and versus how predictable and how conservative an answer is. So you can tweak that over here. You can't tweak that in the native ChatGPT interface, but over the API and over this application here, you can tweak it. So it is up to you and your configuration how repeatable something like that is. Victor, you maybe unmute yourself and explain me a little bit about what you want with a custom GPT. You mean a custom GPT in terms of the product from OpenAI? Victor? Yes. No, so this application here cannot be directly fed into a custom GPT from OpenAI because you have two main problems. First, the amount of data that you can upload to a custom GPT is very, very limited. I think it's maximum 10 documents of some sort. And the second problem is you have only a very specific call that you can make in a structure. So generally, you could put it into a custom GPT model if you want to use a custom GPT just for the interface. That's completely doable over the action functionality, but not natively. It's not natively hooked up to a custom GPT. If you want to do it, you have to do it with an API integration yourself, which is all done rather easily. Yeah, Joachim, you had a question about Flowwise and Engine and why they look so similar. Well, Flowwise uses the same React component in the front end, which is called React Flow, and we also use that same component. From the logic behind, there are some similarities, some sort of evolution, but we have not worked with them together. And that's because for two main reasons. First, Flowwise only talks about chat applications, and secondly, Flowwise is in no way enterprise grade. It's a bunch of open source tools Frankenstein together, and that may or may not work in certain situations. And that's also the caveat that I'm giving. You have no guarantee that what you actually build there is actually working in a productive environment in a reproducible way. We focus much more on enterprise use cases where we have a higher quality standard for our code, but also for the way how we make these things reproducible. And our way to make things reproducible is mostly to have these recipes. And even if they're in a chatbot, we still have always same processes where we can streamline interactions. Flowwise is giving you a lot of hallucinations and a lot of, I'm pasting here something from A to B, which is good for prototyping and trying out, but which is not good once you identified your use cases and you need to be in an environment where you can deliver consistently good results in a way that that scales. That's my take on Flowwise so far. Yeah, we didn't work with them, but of course I used this tool before. I think the principle of no code to do process automation is nothing new, that has been around. If you have ever used something like a UiPath application, this will also look similar to you. Yeah. Okay, Shivani, you also want to have a trial? David, you will note that down. Joachim, I see I answered your question. With that, I think if there's no other questions, we are still in the after show party, still 19 people. That's quite a lot. So if you have any other questions, we'll stay here a little bit more for questions in the smaller rounds. And if nothing else comes up, I wish you a good rest of the day. And I hope that you will get an email from us afterwards. And if we can get a little bit of feedback, we'll be very happy. Thanks.